Ever been interrupted a few times in the night by a baby or a pet? How did you feel the next day, even if you got your regular 8 hours of sleep? A recent study shows a good night's sleep is tied to the number of interruptions you have, not just the hours of sleep you get. And just one night of fragmented sleep can have the same effect of limiting sleep to 4 hours a night. Here with more on this is WSJ health reporter Sumathi Reddy. Sumathi, great to see you. This makes perfect sense to me because this is my life. I mean, between pets and children, the interruptions are endless. Now I know why 8 hours doesn't feel like 8 hours. Tell us about this recent study in the journal Sleep.
Sure. So this study was done in a lab. There was 3 groups. One group was literally woken up every hour for 20 minutes. Another group had a delayed bedtime, so they just got a shorter night of sleep. And then there was a third control group. And they did this for 3 nights, and then they did like sort of standardized testing mood at the end, or every day.
Right. And so the group with fragmented sleep, what were they have found to have the next day? It wasn't just they were crankier, right? It was they had other issues too.
Well, it was mainly a decline in positive mood in this particular study.
Oh, in this particular study.
Yeah,
but
so
there have been other studies that linked it to cognitive decline.
Yeah.
as well?
So there's been other studies that have looked at cognitive things, verbal fluency and other cognitive processes, and they've shown declines, particularly with elderly people, which is interesting.
Interesting. So the older we get, the more important nobody interrupts our sleep, it seems.
Yeah, well, the older people did not have an impact in terms of when they had a shorter night's sleep, but they did have an impact when they had more fragmented sleep.
Maybe that's why older people don't have newborns. That could be part of it.
Yes.
So tell us about the importance of this third stage of sleep, because it seems that researchers were really zoning in on how important that is.
Well, another interesting thing from that sleep study and others is they've shown that fragmented sleep particularly it gives you less slow wave sleep. So that's your deepest stage of sleep. It's the third stage of non-rapid eye movement sleep.
Right.
And it's when your blood pressure's very low, your muscles are relaxed. It's sort of that really deep sleep.
So the takeaway there seems to be that this part of sleep is very, very important. Yeah. And every time you get interrupted, you go back to the first stage. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, all the stages of sleep are pretty important.
Right.
They all have different sort of benefits, and this deals with memory consolidation and other cognitive abilities. Mm-hmm. You don't want to.
Did they zero in on how much of that third stage we should aim to get, or
no? That's
an
interesting question.
Okay.
I've asked that, and no one really knows. That's still sort of under research.
Under research. Now, let's get to some tips on how we can sort of improve our sleep. Obviously, pets and kids, we can't do anything about that other than lock the door.
Yeah.
But the things that we can control, for instance, limiting alcohol.
Yeah, so alcohol fragments your sleep. People think that it helps you sleep, but that's not true at all.
Right.
So that's a thing to avoid. Caffeine,
Right.
try to avoid it later in the day.
Right. And what about exercise?
Exercise can help. Many studies have shown that if you exercise, it helps you fall asleep faster and stay asleep, as long as you're not doing it too close to bedtime. So
right.
Try to avoid it within those 2 hours.
And then is there a sort of ideal temperature that we should keep?
Yeah. So interestingly, studies have found that it's the high 60 range that's most ideal in terms of falling asleep and staying asleep.
Very interesting.
So even as low as 66.
And is it helpful to block out light and sound as well?
Block out light and sound and keeping your sort of smartphones away from you.
Right. Smartphone.
In another room.
In another room, even.
Yeah,
okay, that's a good one.
Because the psychological baggage is
too much.
Yeah.
Well, these are all things that we can control. Thank you so much, Sumathi Reddy, for
Thanks
that.
for having me.